Now let's look at the websites tab. This one is all about how different sites behave in Safari and you can tweak a lot here. On the left, you will see a bunch of options like reader, content blocker, autoplay, page zoom, camera, microphone, and many more. Let's take reader as an example. You can tell Safari to automatically open a site in reader mode. So if you are tired of ads or junk layout, just flip it on for that site. Same thing with other stuff. Want to block autoplay videos? Use the autoplay selection. Want to stop a site from using your camera or mic? Block it right here. You can even control if a site can show pop-ups, share your screen or send notification, and at the bottom there's a when visiting other website settings. This is the default for any site you visit, so you don't have to tweak every single thing manually. Now profile tab, this one's clean. Profiles let you split up your browsing life, work stuff in one profile, personal stuff in another, and they don't mix. Each profile has its own history, bookmarks, extension, cookies, everything. You can create a new one by hitting the plus button at the bottom. Name it whatever, like work banner or shopping addiction, whatever works. Then you can choose an icon and a color to keep it visually separate. Pick which bookmark folder shows in the favorite bar. Set what opens when a new window or tab starts, like the start page or the specific site. So, yes, if you are juggling multiple roles or just want to keep things clean and separate, this is gold. So, now let's move on to the next tab, which is extension tab. This one is pretty simple and easy to understand. Here you will see a list of all the Safari extension that are currently installed. You can choose which extension you want to allow or disable directly from this panel. So if there is an extension you don't want running, just uncheck it. And if you want to enable something, you can do that here as well. It's a quick way to manage what's active in your browser without digging too many settings. Now we are in the advanced tab. This one's got a lot of techy stuff, but I will break it down super simple. So first, you got the option to show the full website address in the smart search field. It's helpful if you want to see the whole link, not just the domain. Then there's some accessibility options like making sure text isn't too small or letting you highlight stuff using the tab key. You can also enable show color in compact tab bar, just a visual thing. Make sure Safari look a bit different. Now under privacy, this is where things get serious. You have got advanced tracking and fingerprint protection, which you can limit to just private browsing. You can block all the cookies if you want to go full ghost mode, or allow certain things like Apple Pay, privacy preserving, or letting highlights share links with Apple. Down below, there's stuff like reading list. You can choose if you want articles save offline automatically. If you are a dev or designer, you can load custom styles. Now let's talk about the default encoding settings. This option controls how Safari interprets the text on websites that don't specify a character encoding. Usually, modern websites define their own encoding using HTML tags like meta, charset, but older website might not do that. In those cases, Safari will fall back to whatever encoding you choose here. By default, it's set to Western iOS Latin 1, but you can change it to UTF-8, which is now the most widely used and recommended encoding on the web. So if you ever visit a site and see weird symbols or broken characters instead of proper text, switching this to UTC-8 might help fix that. For most users, leaving it to UTF-8 is the safest and compatible choice for today. Proxies, now again more for advanced user. And finally, there's a handy toggle to show feature for web developers. It's great if you are building or debugging websites. All right, let's dive into the Safari Developer tab. This is where Safari becomes a serious tool for web development, debugging, and testing. If you build website or work with front-end tools, this menu is where the magic happens. Let's go through each important section. I will explain what they actually do and when you might use them. So the first option is allow remote automation. This option lets Safari be controlled by remote testing framework like Selenium or Apple's WebDrive via the Safari drive. It's mostly used in automated testing environments, for example, running UI test suites across different browsers, performing headless Safari tests in CI/CD pipelines, testing apps or site behave without any manual interaction. To use this feature, you typically need to run the following commands in the terminal first, like Safari drive or dash dash enable. Once enabled, automation tool can launch and control Safari, letting you script browser actions just like the Chrome drive for Chrome. When you can use it only if you are writing automated UI browser test. Most developers don't need this enable unless you are into browser automation or QA testing or building something that needs scripted Safari interaction. And in the future video, I will walk you through writing a Selenium script that uses this. So stay tuned for that as well. JavaScript execution permission allow JavaScript from smart search field. Normally, if you type something like JavaScript alert 1 in Safari address bar, it won't work. It's going to block for security reason now. But if you are going to enable this option, it's going to allow you to test these JavaScript snippets without any blockage. Allow JavaScript from Apple events. Apple events are part of macOS inter-app communication system. This toggle allows apps like Automator, Script Editor, or your own custom Apple script apps to send and execute JavaScript inside Safari tabs. When you can use it if you are building a Apple script or automator workflow that controls Safari, testing bookmarklets or browser automation, writing integration script or dev tools. This is going to be super useful if you are automating Safari for building native or web integration. And let me show you how it works. Here is a simple app script. Here you can see what it does is it opens the example.com in Safari. After a short pause, it runs JavaScript and change the background to pink and it's going to show an alert. Now, if allow JavaScript from Apple event is disabled, Safari will block this script and show a permission error. But if you enable this option, everything is going to work as expected. So this feature is crucial if you are doing automation, scripting or building developer tools on macOS. Disable site-specific hacks or quirks. Safari applies internal quirks fixes for websites that have known bugs or weird code, like rendering issues on outdated sites. When you disable these, Safari stops trying to fix broken pages for you. You get a raw spec complaint rendering on the website. So why it matters? It's useful if you want to test how your sites behave without browser level help, and it's also helpful for debugging cross browser rendering issues. It's going to let you spot sites bugs you might need to fix instead of relying on Safari's internal patching. Now I tried to recreate a visible example for this, but it turns out Safari only applies these quirks to specific websites, and those changes are hard to trigger or even notice. So if you don't see any difference, don't worry. This option is mainly useful when debugging layout issues on complex real world website that Safari tries to patch behind the scenes. Disable local file restriction. By default, Safari restrict JavaScript access to local files, especially file something like file colon slash slash URLs. Like if you are going to open a simple HTML in the browser, you are going to see something like file column slash slash URL. So disabling this is going to allow JavaScript in a local HTML file to fetch other local files. It's super handy for testing file APIs, running local apps without a web server, or previewing page before hosting them. This open up Safari to local file access vulnerability. Don't use it for regular browsing. And just to show you how this works, I have an HTML file open locally in the Safari. Right now, when I click the fetch button, nothing happens because Safari blocks access to the local JSON file. But if I go to the developer menu and disable local file restriction option and click the fetch button again, you will see the data load instantly. So yes, now you get a practical idea of what this feature does. Disable cross origin restriction or course. Course normally blocks your front-end JavaScript from calling APIs on the different domains unless they explicitly allow it. Disabling this means you can test APIs and fetch requests without setting up course headers. Your app can access any resources regardless of domain. It's great for testing your APIs during development, debugging without running into course error, and running front-end code before your backend sets up proper course config. Again, only for local testing, don't leave it on. Let me quickly show you how this works. I have created a simple HTML file. It's called called course text.html. As you can see, I'm running it using Python's built-in HTTP server locally. We are also running a Python-based API server on the port 5000. This server doesn't send any course header, which would normally cause a browser to block the request.
When I click the Fetch button, I don't get any response at first. But as soon as I enable the option Course Origin Restriction and then click the button again, I immediately see a response. So basically, enabling this option allows you to send requests without worrying about CORS headers. I hope this gives you a better idea of how this can be useful.
Now here's the important part. Open up the network tab in the browser, DevTools, and refresh the page. If the course origin restriction are not disabled, you may see two errors. A course error in the console tab that says something like access to fetch at localhost from origin null has been blocked by course policy. Another error you are going to see something like 403 forbidden error in the network tab like fail to load resources. The server responds with a status of 403 forbidden. That 403 error is not caused by course. It simply means the server is rejecting the request from other reason. Examples like wrong method or missing headers. But the course error is what actually prevents your front-end JavaScript from even seeing the response. Intelligent tracking prevention (ITP) debug mode. Safari uses machine learning to block trackers and protect user privacy. When this option is enabled, you should be able to inspect how Safari classifies domains, whether they are tracker or not. It also lets you check if the cookie are being downgraded, blocked, or treated differently. It's primarily useful for ad tech developers, analysts, and cookie content testing or debugging Safari's sticker storage access policy. But here's my honest experience. I tried enabling this and tested cookies across different domains, including iframe setups and cross domain cookies, but I couldn't get Safari to show any visible tracking classification or storage warning or special console logs. Even with debug mode enabled, no additional logs or tracker flags appeared. Maybe this feature requires a more advanced setup or Apple specific tracker behavior to trigger it, but for now it's unclear how to practically demonstrate it in a simple dev setup. Enable private click measurement or PCM debug mode. This is something Apple is pretty excited about, probably because they are the first one to actually ship it. So let me break it down what it basically is. So without PCM, the traditional tracking, imagine you click an ad for shoes. With traditional tracking, the ad platforms like Facebook or Google Ads can link your click to your exact identity, your name, email, browsing history, purchase habits, even your location. They can pull this off using third parties cookies, redirect URLs with user IDs, browser fingerprinting. This builds a personal profile of you across the internet. Now, the problem is they don't just know someone bought shoes after seeing the ad, they know exactly who did it and they keep tracking you for future ads. That's what Apple calls cross site tracking. Now, what PCM changes? With PCM, Safari still tells advertiser if a click lead to a purchase, but in a privacy friendly way. Instead of sending who clicked it, it sends a campaign ID up to 64 values, enough to track ad verifications, a conversion value up to 6 bytes, like small purchase or big purchase. The data is delayed and sent through the browser itself, so it can't be tied to your exact visit or device. No personal identifier, IP, cookies, fingerprint are included. So the advertiser sees something like ad campaign tool got a conversion worth 3. It's not like Imran who searched for laptops yesterday and lives in Mumbai bought Nike shoes at 2:30 p.m. When you enable debug mode, you can actually test this locally and see how it works behind the scenes. A developer might use Safari's private click measurement PCM debug mode mainly when they are building or testing ads or conversion tracking from a site or app. Example, you run an e-commerce site and want to see if PCM correctly recorded a sale after someone clicked an ad in Safari. Debug mode lets you simulate ad clicks and conversion without waiting for real traffic. Working on an analyst or ad tech platforms. Example, like you are developing a privacy friendly attribution tool that integrates with PCM. Debug mode helps you to verify your events are sent or received correctly or not. So like Apple is excited about this feature. The reason is that they are first to implement this Web3 privacy, and also this is like a middle ground. Advertisers still get useful performance metrics without tracking individuals, and it aligns with Apple's brand of privacy first web features, same family as intelligent tracking, prevention. And again I tried to simulate this feature, but for some reason it's not showing any result. I enable PCM debug mode and attempt basic click to redirect to conversion setup like a fake ad flows, but no visual logs or debugging output appeared in the console or network tab. It seems that you need to specify ad attribution flow, including redirect chains and meta tags to trigger it, which is hard to replicate casually. So these feature ITP debug mode and PCM debug mode are very powerful but quite hard to demonstrate without a very specific ad tech style environment. If I manage to figure out how to practically test and visualize this feature in the future, I will definitely share a follow-up video with examples and a walkthrough. For now, I hope this give you some insight into what these toggles are intended to do, even if we couldn't demo them today. Allow unsigned extension. Normally, Safari only loads extensions that are signed and notarized by Apple for security and trust reasons. If you are building your own Safari extension or testing one from a teammate, you can load it directly from your local machine. Skip the whole notarization process during the development. Second is add temporary extension. Click this to choose a .safari extension or .f file and load it just for the current session. Once Safari restart, it's going to remove it. This is a must use for extension developer. Testing changes rapidly without publishing. Also, it's useful for like debugging extension behavior on real pages. Feature flag. I hope you remember we have seen this feature previously, but again we are going through a simple summary. Right next to the developer tab, you will see a feature flag. This is where Safari lists experimental features that Apple is currently testing. Think of it like a developer playground. The tools and APIs here might be unfinished, unstable, or changed without notice. But if you are a developer, this section gives you a sneak peek into the future of web platforms on Safari. Most users can ignore this section completely, but if you are doing front end work, testing cutting edge feature, or just experimenting, this is worth exploring. One example you will find here is Web GPU. Safari's support for a powerful new graphic API. It's especially useful for graphic heavy web apps, simulation, or even creative tools that need GPU acceleration. And yes, again, I will be making a dedicated video about Web GPU soon, so stay tuned for that. So thanks for watching. I hope you like this video and please like, subscribe and share.